Title Dry September is very important. The significance of the title of this short story is when the story itself opens, the narrator tells the readers that there has been 62 rainless days in Jefferson, the town where the incident takes place, the story takes place, and it is because of the weather. Time and again, it has been mentioned that the characters somewhat give the weather an excuse for their brutality, for their barbaric behavior, for their otherization, for their insensitivity, for their show of privilege, their exhibiting of privilege or strength. Now, dry, as you know, means lack of coolness. The weather is merciless because it is extremely hot. People can hardly breathe. They have no solace because there is no rain. So that is literal. Literally, it is a dry September. Nothing is growing. Plants are dying because there's no water. There's no rain. And there is also a metaphorical dryness that is known as spiritual drought. People are suffering from spiritual drought. Now, what do we mean by spiritual drought? When individuals stop thinking in lines of universality, universal brotherhood, compassion, and boil down to this narrow compartmentalization of race, that is where race, caste, gender, religion, whatever, if you look at it in a general context, what happens is a person's spiritual degradation starts from there. So, most characters in the short story are spiritually degraded. They face spiritual drought. Just like water nourishes and wipes away dryness, leading or paving way for life to grow, in the same manner, soul also needs watering. Soul needs watering through compassion. And if there is lack of compassion, soul ultimately will have dryness, will face dryness, suffer from dryness, drought, and eventually there will be degradation of the soul. Like you already know, Miss Minnie Cooper has alleged this man. It has still not been proven in the eyes of the law. However, McLendon decides to take it upon him to actually get rid of this man who is simply not his own but the other. And why this otherization? Simply because the color of their skin do not match. McLendon is fair looking, and this man, Will Mays, was apparently not a fair looking person. He was an African American with a darker skin tone. So politics of pigmentation happened. That is what spiritual, if we come back to the idea of spiritual degeneration or spiritual drought. Hence, the title of the short story has two layers. One is literal dryness, it's scorching heat, no rain, no nurturing of life, and metaphorical dryness where people have stopped nurturing their soul. Soul is being corroded, it is being corrupted. How? Due to segregation, prejudice, biasness, otherization on the basis of color of the skin. Moving on to another important aspect here is the characters of the story. Now we know Will Mays, he is the person, he is the victim of the mob lynching, and his identity is an African American male belonging to the marginalized section of the society, the periphery. Then you have the barber Hawkshaw, who is actually trying to find a balance. He wants law to take its due course. Law should eventually find out what actually happened. And then there are people like McClendon, the extremists. And McClendon actually is, I already told you, a white male, the face of privilege. He has all the privilege, he has all the power in hand. And then there is Miss Minnie Cooper, the white goddess, the lily that needs to be protected, and who can never lie according to white patriarchal society. This delicate female, this beautiful, delicate female, the epitome of conventional feminine beauty as dictated by Western idea, Western eye, can never lie. But all these characters also have some kind of backstory to them. They too are somehow a victim of social norms, society, and how the norms of society functions, the societal machinery. For instance, McClendon, when the when the story ends, we come to know that he goes on, he is an extremely abusive husband who goes and actually thrashes his wife. It is a very, very disturbing scene where the wife, Mrs. McClendon, is physically abused. However, she does not retaliate, she does not resist his abusive behavior. So he is also a sort of a victim, if we can say, of this idea of hypermasculinity. The idea of hypermasculinity, the idea of gender superiority that is deeply ingrained in our patriarchal society. Men should not cry. Boys are not supposed to cry. Only girls cry. Boys are supposed to be strong. These are some of the uh, ideas that are put into a young male's head. A young male is conditioned in such a way that he starts thinking that a woman or a girl is certainly inferior to him. He grows up with this idea of him being a little privileged than a female. So this hypermasculinity, or a toxic masculinity, a little bit higher than hypermasculinity will be toxic masculinity, can be found. These traces are very, very clearly found in McClendon. He is the bravado, and please note, it is mentioned that he fought, he was in the frontier, he was leading when there was a war with France. When there was war in France, he was leading, not with France, but in France, he was leading. So he is a war hero, an epitome of masculinity, as society claims it to be, as society has structured masculinity. Then we come to Miss Minnie Cooper. We discussed a little about her. Although she is the white goddess who everybody favors, everybody thinks needs to be protected, she too has her own social pressure. For instance, she fights ageism. Because she is growing old, she has this pressure of looking young, and it is because of this psychological disturbance inside her, where she still wants to retain her idea, that idea of she being the object of affection, the object of desire for young men. In order to retain her youth, she forms this illusion of her being um, being looked at or preyed upon by many men, and Will Mays unfortunately became a target of this illusion of hers. Then we have, of course, Hawkshaw, who tries to place a balance. Of course, he is, just because he talks sense, just because he rises above others and leaves behind discrimination on the basis of race, he is considered to be a nigger lover. Nigger, the word that is supposed to be derogatory, an insult to the African American community. Then we move on to another character, and of course the central character of the story. We don't know much about him. He His story is not told. We don't know much about Will Mays, except for the fact that he's a male, his gender being male, his race being African. So naturally he falls under the marginalized category, the periphery. So we'll discuss the characters and we discuss the title. These two are very important, and William Faulkner is known to be a lot sensitive towards issues of his place, and it is believed that he was raised by an African American nanny, and he was very close to her, and that is the reason why he is so sensitive towards issues regarding race, racial discrimination, segregation, otherization in America South.